to have it where we can answer questions along the way. Art is going to join us virtually, so this may be just a bit of a challenge for just one moment when we switch presenters, but just bear with us. I want to start tonight, and I want to ask, how many of you were affected? How many of you guys are familiar with the Target breach? Everybody pretty familiar? Anyone affected by that? Okay, I've got 1, 2, some people that had to have your credit card reissued or whatever. And really what I want to do, and I understand the medical profession. I've been doing this 15 years, and I've served this industry for a long time. And I think that one of the things that you guys struggle with a lot is the fact that all these laws are coming in on it. And it feels like, you know, they're wanting more and more and more and more. But I want to kind of let your mind kind of wonder, what if they wouldn't have told you that your credit card was stolen at whenever the Target event happened? You know, how would that make you feel that your information had been released and, you know, basically bad guys that have it, you don't know. So as we kind of go through this, I want you to think about not so much being a provider, but more about being a patient, and if your records are breached or something like that. So what we want to do is we want to learn why HIPAA compliance is important for your office. And also want to show you a lot of ways that make it where it's not this huge hill to climb. How many in here have had a risk assessment? I've been through that. And would you say you're compliant now? They say about 70%, we'll get there again, 70% are not actually compliant after things. But Art's going to be here with us here, and I'm going to turn it over to him. And he is really an expert. If you have questions about it, he's really going to be able to answer that. We're going to have an opportunity to ask some questions. All right, Art. Let me see. Are you with me?
I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
You talk for me.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Everybody here?
How about now?
All right. Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
All right, sounds good. Sounds good. So, thank you, Philip. You know, when we talk about HIPAA, everyone you know mentions HIPAA regulations and being compliant with HIPAA, and a lot of individuals are under the impression it's a single regulation, but really HIPAA is made up of two major rules. It's the privacy rule and the security rule. And the privacy rule is all about an individual's right to protect their own information, to control who has access to their information, and what medical practices can do with that information. There we go. And that we think of the privacy rule as you know, relating to patients and also to paper charts. On the other hand, the security rule is more about electronic records, more about electronic health care and medical records. And the security rule is all about protecting that electronic medical records as big pushes away from paper to EMRs and EHRs. It went off the screen. Sorry about that.
Sorry, I'm doing that. I was trying to turn the volume up for you, but I'm going to have to leave it alone.
All right, I'll talk a little louder. How's that? So the security rule is all about making sure that medical practice and healthcare organizations you know, have administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. And all of this electronic medical or electronic data that's being created needs to be protected. So HIPAA really is the privacy rule and the security rule. All right, next slide, please.
I did that. Give me 1 second, Art. I'm sorry.
Not a problem. All right, so as Paul Revere is saying on his course that the HIPAA audits are coming, and the truth is the enforcement of HIPAA is increasing. And there's multiple ways that healthcare organizations and medical practices can come under the scrutiny of the government. The Office of Civil Rights under Health and Human Services, they're charged with enforcing HIPAA. And there's multiple things that are happening. One, random HIPAA audits are occurring. So the OCR is about to send out letters. They're actually started to send out pre-audit letters, and they're trying to identify medical practices, healthcare organizations, hospitals that they want to select to be audited to make sure that those organizations are complying with HIPAA regulations. So about 500 organizations are going to be selected in 2015, and these are very similar to the IRS and tax audits. They're going to be random. They're going to select individual organizations, make sure that organization is complying with HIPAA regulations, and if they're not, they're going to fine those organizations. In fact, they were very good at saying any fines that we receive as part of this audit program will go into our budget, and that'll give us enough money so we can actually have more audits. So they have a vested interest to audit practices, and they also have a very vested interest into giving out fines and funding their budget. And really what they're trying to do is they're trying to get compliance with HIPAA regulations. They want to push organizations to protect all of this electronic health records that are being created. In addition, there is meaningful use audits. All right, so if an organization is going for meaningful use incentives, so by implementing electronic health records, the government is giving incentive funds. But with those incentive funds, there are meaningful use audits to make sure that organizations are complying. And one of the pieces of compliance for meaningful use is to make sure that you're HIPAA compliant. 1 out of 5 providers, 20% of all providers that are going for meaningful use are being audited. And you can be audited before the government gives you the meaningful use dollars, or you can be audited afterwards. So you can get an audit notification back to 2011, 2012, 2013. So we're seeing a lot of audits happening, and a lot of organizations are failing because they haven't done a security risk assessment, which is part of HIPAA and the security rule. So we're seeing a lot of those audits taking place. In addition, an organization could be audited if an employee, has a complaint and that they go and they complain to the Office of Civil Rights. OCR could audit that organization, or if a patient has a complaint. So we're seeing a lot of audits and increases. You can see here from 2003 to 2013, audits and investigations are increasing dramatically. All right, Philip.
I want to talk
Turn that over to you now.
Thank you, Art. I want to talk a little bit about some things that have happened here locally. And there's been over 100 million total health records compromised since 2009. Y'all understand why health records are so valuable? Anybody want to guess on the black market what a health record is worth? Give me a number. Let's juxtapose that to a credit card. Credit card, $1, $2. Patient record, $20 to $50. So the bad guys make a lot of money off of this. And because of the information is so rich, it has all of the elements of what that there's so many avenues for theft or fraud that can come. You can fraud the Medicare, Medicaid, or health insurance company. You can steal someone's identity. You can get credit in their name. I mean, there's just a million things you can do with a health record. So really, what you're touching every day has an extreme amount of value to it. And currently, this Misery Loves company, right now in the Senate, they have, in the Alabama Senate, they have a bill. Alabama is one of the last, there's 3 states that have not passed this bill. So I believe it will happen. And it basically is, not only is it the records for medical in any business, having lost 500 records, they have to publicly submit that they've lost the records, of course, touching all the 500 people, but as well as the general public. So this is not going to just be a HIPAA or a medical thing. All businesses are going to fall underneath this category. And if you read State Law 106, it reads just like the HIPAA law. And it is exactly the same type of language. Because these legislators, they're attorneys, and they're probably, someone else is writing that. But what happens is something bad happens, a breach happens. And then all of a sudden there's a rush of people calling them saying, what are you going to do to protect us from this? So then they begin to adopt and they begin to put in laws. So this is not just going to be for the healthcare. This is coming to all businesses, and it will, in the very near future, there's not a day that goes by that I don't hear about a breach. And not just medical, I'm talking about something. Even in my own practice of doing IT, I had a title company that just lost $164,000. And it was all done off of a stolen email address by one of their largest real estate agents that they worked for. Somebody took that real estate agent, hacked their email, and they just watched it. And they watched transactions, they watched the email. They knew the guy was going to a closing. Immediately after the closing, they send an email to the agent and say, hey, cancel that check. We'll pay the $29 closing fee, cancellation fee. Wire the money here. And they did it. That money was gone. That happened less than a month ago. $160,000 literally gone, because there's places on this planet where that's what they do. They're set up specifically and protected that don't have to have your name on a bank account. So this is real stuff that's going on. This is an event that happened that basically a walk-in clinic, and one of the girls that works there and one of the and her manager are buddies. And one of the girl in the front office, her husband works at a plant or something, and they're all passing. She's giving him all kinds of stuff about his employees. Well, one of his employees comes in and she says something about that her supervisor said he was gay. This is real life stuff. Said he was gay, but she tells on him to the employer and gets this woman fired. In reality, this nurse is saying, what happened is there's HIPAA violations going on. They're reporting all about this guy's employees, but she winds up getting in trouble. And at the end of the day, she doesn't know what to do, because if she goes to her supervisor, then she's going to get fired from her job, right? And these kind of situations happen in offices, and people don't know where to go. In our industry, in the IT industry, there's a thing called BSA, and it is an organization especially designed for whistleblowers, for people who do pirate software. An employee can say, hey, my business is pirating software, and I really feel like this is what's going to start happening, even in the medical industry, where one of your staff is going to get upset or whatever, and then they're going to talk. And if you don't have yourself properly covered, you're going to be in trouble. Here's another one where a guy gets, this was in A.K.T, if I'm not mistaken. And the guy gets 6 years because he was doing fraudulent activity. 3 years in jail and 3 years house arrest, basically for healthcare fraud, where they were doing a benefit plan that they were frauding on a flexible spending account. I want to pop through these things quick, just really to kind of bring it home. This isn't stuff that happens just in big cities. This is another one in Anniston, where they were being investigated for HIPAA violations. Here's one from the rule had been broken, and 4,500 patient records had been taken from really 2 people in cohorts. And you'll see a lot of this is happening internally within the office. And what you have to do is you have to have your staff trained, and then they also have to sign a document that says, I'm aware of this. As I'll get to one here in a second. And here's another one. 2009, there's healthcare IT news. More than 41 million people have had their protected health information. That was back in March. Here's another one with medical files from the Decatur News being breached. 3,100 patients, 69 cases, and the majority of patients were treated by this particular doctor. This stuff comes out in the news. That's not going to be good for your practice. That you're the one name that you've lost the records. American Family Care, they lost, how many was it? I forget how many records that they lost, but they had a breach in 2014. It was updated in 2015. And letters were going out to affected patients warning them to watch for identity theft, because now their records are out in the wild. And that was in, let's see, this was in Birmingham. Here's an optical company who sued their employees for the misappropriation of handling patient records. So obviously he had his ducks in a row where at least the person that had been misappropriately handled the records, he was able to sue his employees. They lost 1,100 patient records. Here's just a couple of them that have happened. Opelika, Bessemer, Centerpoint, Decatur, Ozark, Birmingham. Anybody know of anything here locally that has any breaches or anything? I looked around, I didn't find any from Mobile. I didn't know if someone had knew of something that had happened where it had been reported. All right, Art, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, well, thank you. And so with all those breaches that Philip mentioned, and people always talk about HIPAA fines and they're worried about being fined, but really what organizations need to worry about is data breaches. You know, data breaches are much more expensive than a fine that the government will give you, and it's really you know, there's a study that happened by the Poneman Institute, and they came out with healthcare-related organizations. For a data breach is estimated at $233 per record, right? So if an organization has a breach and it's 100 records, it's 23,000. 1,000 records, that's $250,000, and 10,000 records, that's $2.3 million. So the cost of breaches could escalate very quickly. Think of how many records that you have in your electronic health records. So if a hacker got into that and got a breach, that could be tens of thousands of records costing millions of dollars. And what makes up that $233? It's basically made up of two things: indirect costs and direct costs. And indirect costs are basically, you know, turnover of existing patients or customers, right? Patients don't trust you anymore. They don't want to deal with your healthcare organization. They don't think you can protect their information. They go to another provider. The second one is diminished customer acquisition. So customers or patients will not come to your practice because your reputation has been damaged. They don't feel that you'll protect their information, and they'll go to someplace else for medical treatment. So the bottom line is that those indirect costs are basically loss of revenue, all right? And that's what makes up a big part of that $233 record. You're going to lose revenue from losing patients and not getting new patients. And then there's direct costs. There's you know, forensics, trying to figure out what was breached, crisis management, notification costs, so that, you know, notifying patients and IT activity, and then there's also the credit monitoring and any of those additional costs. So you know, a breach could be very expensive and it could add up very quickly. My next slide, please. All right, so one example, and Philip gave a lot of examples about organizations that were breached. I'm going to talk about another one. Phoenix Cardiac Surgery, a very small cardiac surgery center in Arizona. They have about four physicians, 15 employees. They had a HIPAA violation. They were sharing patient information on Google Calendar. One patient could see someone else's information. It wasn't a big breach, but the Office of Civil Rights investigated that breach, and they realized that the organization didn't have any policies or procedures. They didn't do any risk assessments. They had not trained their employees. They basically had, ignored HIPAA regulations, and they gave out a $100,000 fine to that organization. In itself, it's not a huge fine, but $100,000 made headlines. In fact, if you do a Google search on Phoenix cardiac surgery, the first result will be their website. The next 9 results on the first page will be all about this $100,000 fine. The next 9 pages are all about this $100,000 HIPAA fine. So clearly, Phoenix cardiac surgery's reputation has been damaged. New patients will do a Google search. They may not know what's going on with HIPAA or why they got this fine, but they may look for someone else. And once it's in Google, once it's on, this search, it's very difficult to get rid of this. So this damage to Phoenix cardiac surgery's reputation will last a very long time. Next slide, please.
I'll make one mention right here, Art. In order to get rid of that, we also own a marketing company, and I have SEO staff, guys that do search engine optimization. And to bury something like that, you can't make it go away. You have to overwhelm with good stuff, right? And you'll spend 50 grand to make something like that get buried deep enough so that it won't show up on page 1. There's some companies we work with that have had some events, and again, a lot of times it's not even that bad. But when you see it like that, it's horrible. I mean, the first thing people run, and you have to bury that, and it's very expensive. All right, Art.
All right, so on top of the expense of a breach, the maximum fine that the Office of Civil Rights could give out is $1.5 million. So if you had a breach and OCR found out that you were not complying with HIPAA regulations and that caused a breach, on top of that $233 per record, you can also get hit with a $1.5 million fine. So as you can see, it's very expensive to have data breaches. Healthcare-related data breaches, very expensive from the breach point of view and also from a fine. It's much cheaper to protect the information and be HIPAA compliant than it is trying to react to a breach and an investigation by OCR. Slide. All right, so let's talk about the why breaches occur. What are the categories? All right, the leading cause of HIPAA-related breaches are lost laptops and portable media, and we'll drill into each one of those. 40% of all breaches. Inappropriate access to patient information makes up 30% of all breaches. Email breaches makes up 10% of all breaches, and hacking makes up 10% of all breaches, except that hacking usually results in the largest amount of breaches. So these are the top categories of breaches. And let's take a look at each one. Let's go to the next slide. And the last one on this slide was the loss of backup tapes and tape drives. Okay, so when we look at the leading cause of portable, of breaches, it is portable media. And portable media are smartphones, tablets, USB drives, CDs, all right? So those are the leading cause of breaches. And it's funny, because when we do HIPAA risk assessments, a lot of organizations tell us, we don't have any patient information on laptops, and we don't have it on USB drives. And then we run these scans and we find hundreds of records on laptops. And those records could be email attachments, they could be scanned explanation of benefits, there could be Excel spreadsheets or Word documents. There's usually a lot more information on these portable media and portable drives than organizations think. And the key here is that you need to protect that information. And one of the best ways of protecting information is through the use of encryption. Right? Encryption is a safe harbor under the HIPAA security rule, meaning any device or data that's encrypted and it's lost or stolen would not lead to a reportable breach. So organizations would start to encrypt their laptops and their smartphones and their tablets. Even if they're lost or stolen, it wouldn't result in a reportable breach. It's a great way of lowering the risk of having a HIPAA breach. All right, next slide. All right, so then, the next leading cause is inappropriate access to patient information. All right, and that happens basically, people are looking at information that they shouldn't. People have access to patient information that shouldn't. One of the ways is snooping, all right? It's employees looking at information that they shouldn't be looking at. They're not providing care, all right? So an example is Kim Kardashian. When she had her baby out in LA, 6 nurses were fired because they were going into the EHR, looking at information. Maybe they're trying to get the baby's name, maybe they're trying to sell it to Star Magazine, or People Magazine, and they got caught doing that. But this happens a lot, that people are looking at records that they shouldn't be looking at, maybe neighbors or spouses or celebrities. And really, the key here is to make sure employees are not looking at that information. The next, and this is a real big one, is stealing. All right, and people are taking information and stealing it and using it for identity theft, for tax returns. In fact, in Florida, gang members are having their girlfriends, helping their girlfriends get hired at medical practices. Girlfriends are going into the EHR, downloading patient information, so security number, name, address, date of birth, giving it back to the gang members, and gang members, instead of selling drugs on the street, are filing false tax returns. All right, they're making $40,000 to $50,000 a night by filing false tax returns, and it's rampant in Florida. It's all over Florida and it's spreading. So, the information, healthcare information, is very valuable. In fact, a healthcare record is worth about $50 a record, where a credit card is worth about 99 cents. So it's, a lot of organizations and criminal organizations are trying to get their hands on healthcare information and for illegal use. And then you could also have disgruntled employees that are modifying or deleting information. So, an organization needs to protect all of this electronic health record. The next, go to the next slide, please. The next leading category is email, and sending email and patient information via email, and that could be name, address, that could be medical history, and if it's not secured, if it's not encrypted, that would be a HIPAA violation, and we're seeing a lot more of that, emailing records to the wrong patients or to the wrong organization. Key here is to make sure that everyone's using their own user ID and password, that they're using strong passwords and not using passwords that are easily guessed. But the key here is to implement email encryption. Again, anything that's encrypted would not result in a reportable breach. So if you're going to email patient information to patients, that should be encrypted. If you're going to email patient information to other providers or other practices, email encryption should be used. So, and Philip, I know you guys could give a lot more information on email encryption and all of that, but the key here, the takeaway is, if you're sending patient information, it needs to be secured and encrypted. Same thing with text messages as well. All right, and we'll go to the next slide here. All right, so the next one, and as most people are aware of, is hacking. All right, and I'm sure all of you have heard about the Anthem breach. 80 million records have been breached. Hackers got in and stole all of this information. So this is, if I ran a healthcare organization, medical practice, this would be one of my major concerns. As I said, that a healthcare record is worth $50, very valuable and very expensive to an organization that was breached. So the key to making sure that you're not a victim of hacking is to make sure that you're using passwords, and passwords are changed frequently. And by changing, a lot of organizations say, why do we have to change our passwords? Well, if someone was to get a hold of a password and that password was never changed, then that breach could go on forever. It can go on for months or years or multiple years. Right? So you want to make sure that your employees are changing their passwords. You want to make sure that they're using complex passwords. Not, the leading password that people use is the word password. The second leading password is 123456. Very easily guessed. So, employees will be very upset if you make them use complex passwords and change them frequently because they have so many passwords. But the best way of protecting that information is to make sure that you have strong password controls. Security is a balance between convenience and security. And the more secure, the less convenient. The less convenient, the less secure. The more convenient, less secure. So you want to make sure that you have strong password practices. You want to make sure that everyone's running antivirus and anti-malware. You also want to make sure that employees are aware of phishing scams, so they understand they shouldn't be a victim of a fake email giving out confidential information. And the next two are really important. You want to make sure that all your systems are up to date, that they have security updates, either Microsoft updates, Acrobat, Adobe updates, all of your software, EMRs. You want to make sure that that's all up to date, because this is how hackers get in. They find vulnerabilities or security holes, and they exploit that and access the network. And the next thing that you want to do is you want to form vulnerability scans. You want to make sure you identify vulnerabilities, security holes, and then obviously you want to patch those. And anytime there's a breach, if there was a breach, and OCR is investigating it, they always want to see, where is your vulnerability scan? Have you performed vulnerability scans? Have you patched that? So, an organization up in Alaska had a breach, and they were still using Windows XP, and there's no patches for Windows XP. That organization received a very large HIPAA fine because they were not patching those systems. So if you're still running Windows XP, that would not be HIPAA compliant. All right, next slide. Okay, now next one is backups and backup tapes, and the reality is backups are great. Everyone should have backups of that data. You want to be able to recover if there's a deleted record or there was some kind of system crash. But if you're still using backup tapes, that is it should be a concern to you, because all of your information, all your EHR is on that backup tape. All of your files, digital x-rays, Word documents, Excel spreadsheets that all can have patient information are sitting on backup tapes. If those tapes are taken out of the office and it's lost or stolen and it's non-encrypted, that could be a very large breach. So by moving that data, that could be on backup tapes, you could be exposing yourself or potentially exposing yourself to a large breach. So, what you want to start to look at is off-site backup, secure, encrypted, automatic backup that will make sure that you can recover if there was some sort of disaster, and also that the data is protected and secured. And the reality is, the other piece of HIPAA says that you need to make sure that you have access to patient information. So you have to have a disaster recovery plan in place. Part of HIPAA requirements are a disaster recovery plan. And a lot of organizations think, well, I have a backup tape and we'll order a new server and that'll be my disaster recovery plan. That really is not a disaster recovery plan. It could take 2 weeks before a server comes in. You have 2 weeks without access to patient information. So HIPAA regulations require more immediate access to patient information. So you need to have a disaster recovery plan, you need to test it, you need to document it, and it needs to be ready in the event of a disaster. All right, next slide. All right, so CMS gives some guidelines, the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services, about HIPAA, and they basically say that a lot of small medical practices think HIPAA is optional, and they're very clear in saying security risk analysis is not optional. All right, and just because your EHR is meaningful use compliant, and they call it HIPAA compliant, doesn't mean you're HIPAA compliant. You still need to do security risk assessments, train your employees, have policies and procedures. So, and your EHR vendor is not responsible for your HIPAA compliance. You are responsible to make sure that your organization is compliant. Next slide. Oh, and the last one on this one is that a risk assessment is more than just a checklist, more than just a yes or no. Do you have a firewall? Yes. Do you train your employees? Yes, no. It needs to look at how you're protecting patient information, where patient information is, and provide additional safeguards to protect that information further. So risk assessment needs to be very thorough. All right, next slide, please. Right? Risk assessments are not, once and done. You need to perform risk assessments every year on an annual basis, and it needs to look at everything, not just your EHR, because there could be patient information in email. It could be patient information on scanned explanation of benefits on PDFs. It could be in medical billing systems, could be in transcription systems. It could be digital x-rays. So when you look at the risk to patient information, you need to look at it throughout all of your systems. All right, and this one's really important. It says that small practices can do these risk assessments themselves, but they may want to look at professionals that will do a thorough job, because it needs to stand up to a compliance review. All right, if you're audited, either by the RAM audit or by a breach, you need to be able to make sure that your risk assessment is thorough enough that it will pass that audit. Because if it's not, that the fines will increase because you have not performed a thorough risk assessment. All right, next slide, please. All right, so here's some interesting facts. 70% of the healthcare industry are not HIPAA compliant. That's what Health and Human Services says. So that speaks volumes to, we have 100 million patient records breached. 70% are not HIPAA compliant. That's probably a good reason why we have so many breaches, and why we're seeing so much enforcement now. The enforcement has increased because the government is trying to push medical practices and healthcare organizations to become HIPAA compliant. And 79% of meaningful use audits have resulted in failure. All right, so we're seeing a lot of audits that are organizations are being audited, and those organizations are failing those audits. Next slide, please. All right, so if you're going for meaningful use and you're attesting, you're basically saying that we are HIPAA compliant, we have done a risk assessment, and you need to make sure that that you have performed that risk assessment, and that risk assessment will pass that audit. What we're seeing, leading cause of failing a meaningful use audit is the lack of a going for meaningful use. Next slide, please. All right, and what we're seeing is, like here, there's an example. A CFO of Shelby Regional Medical Center is going to jail for 23 months and has to pay $4.5 million because he lied and the organization lied about being HIPAA compliant and meaningful use. Basically, you're getting meaningful use dollars, and they didn't even have electronic health records. All right, so this was blatantly a lie. And one of the things is, when you attest, you were saying we have done everything we need to receive meaningful use incentive dollars, and if you fail that's basically a criminal activity. Now will you go to jail? Most likely not. What'll happen is those incentive funds will be taken away. But if if it's as severe as this one, you could get put into jail and fined heavily. But the reality is, most practices that do fail meaningful use audits, they lose that year's incentive funds, and it could open up an investigation to other years. So if you fail 2014 audit, they could look at 2013, 2012, and you could wind up giving back all of those incentive funds that you had if you have not, really truly complied with everything that it takes to be compliant with meaningful use. Next slide, please. All right, Philip, I'm going to turn it back over to you, all right?
All right, we're going to see if you guys have been listening. This is pass or fail. So we're going to do a quick, review.
Philip, they have these in their folders too, so if y'all want to check it off as he goes through them, feel free.
An organization performs a risk assessment within the past year. Is that required? Every year. And I'm asking it in the form of a question because your answer should be yes. And of course, that is required. Every year. It gets easier after you've done the first one, of course, because you can you kind of know the standards and you're basically updating the records. Second, you have written policies and procedures that address the administrative, physical, and technical safeguards of the HIPAA security rule. course, that is required. Has each of your employees gone through HIPAA security training and taken the HIPAA security compliance test? That is another requirement. Have your business associates signed business associate agreements? Of course, that is another requirement. Does the organization encrypt email to protect electronic protected health information, patient data, and important information sent through email? That would include texting. I know that a lot of times that, you know, and there's even some free text apps out there for the medical practice that work well as well. So again, that is required. And you know, that's one of the biggest breaches between the mobile devices, the smartphones. I think I read a stat the other day that 620,000 laptops were lost in airports in 1 year. 620,000. Of course, encrypting is the best way to protect the contents of sensitive information. It provides a safe harbor against a breach, because if your devices are encrypted, it's not reported, which is really where you want to get. You want something bad to happen, something that's going to happen. You know, I mean, I don't know if you've ever lost your cell phone or something. That's going to happen probably to most people at some point. You want it to where it's non-reported, where it's not an issue. Does the organization have system auditing, logging of all access to EPHI and patient data set up to facilitate the detection of unauthorized access to EPHI and patient data? Reviewing those audit logs. Is there an audit log system in place, and are we able to review it? And a lot of those things are actually after the fact, whenever you look at how a real breach often takes place, and you know, but you have to have the logs to determine who's doing what. A lot of people, anybody use Dropbox? Somebody use Dropbox. Come on now. It's terrible, because there's no audits. It's as if some of the stuff that he talked about, how some of these folks are stealing records, is they install Dropbox on their computer, they move the patient records in Dropbox, it syncs to their home computer or wherever, then they uninstall it. 10,000 records can get taken in 15 minutes, just like that. And there's no log, no anything of what just happened. That's also required. And again, we don't want to get caught with our head in the sand. This is, I work with a lot of small practices, and I try to have meaningful conversation with them in a way of, I take a consultative approach. We're not trying to sell anybody anything, because that's just not the nature. That's not, I don't believe, a good way to do business. But it's important that you take, there's so much misconception out there about what is real and what's not real. That's why I love having Art as a partner, because he knows, and if I have a question, I have somebody I can go to and say, hey, what's this look like? You cannot afford to ignore HIPAA. And with 1 in 5 practices going to be audited, there's going to be a lot of local stuff. It's going to, it's happening already. And you make mention of, why is it that a credit card's only worth $1 nowadays in the black market? It's because they have their fraud protection so good that it's going to be a short window that you're going to get to use it. And eventually, I see as the future comes down the pike here, that we're going to get more secure, not only in just the medical, but in all types of data. This is, of course, people often learn. I mean, I can sell a good backup system after the server crashes. That's normally how it goes. But you don't want to be in a bad position, because it really and truly could hurt your practice immensely if something were to happen that was to get out in the public. I mean, think about if somebody Googled your practice and they saw the first 10 pages the first 10 entries, because that is, if you know anything about search engine optimization, like the HHS would have incredible authority on Google, which means basically whatever they write something, it's going to be classed and weighed very heavily on Google. And so it's very, very, very difficult to get that stuff off the page. That's just simply not acceptable. Let's talk about how we can help. And it's really more of a private conversation because everybody's practice is a little bit different. But for HIPAA security, the first thing you do, and that's really what the goal is tonight, you got to know what the risk is. ART has a great program that is easy to do. I have literally been working with a client of mine who spent $20,000 to do that. And I've done, it seemed to me, like most of the lifting. She hired a company to do it, $20,000, and it was not near what ART has done for me. I've been through the risk assessment. It's not painful. It provides all the documentation for you and all that, and I'll get to that in a second. But that's the first thing you need to do, because at that point, then you're not what's called willful negligence. You're covered deeply because of the assessment, and you know where you are. It doesn't say, the law doesn't say you have to be 100% compliant. It says you have to know where your risks are, and you have to have a path to mitigating those risks. Training, that's another huge thing that is, is huge, because I don't know how many people, and it's every day, that there's phishing attacks. Everybody know what phishing email attacks are? I bet if you look through your inbox at least once a week, there is a phishing attack that you see in your inbox if you're paying attention. It is the hardest thing to defend against because, again, they may hack into your home and use you as a proxy to send out all this stuff. And it happens in a matter of, they can send out 100,000 emails in 2 hours on a home computer. So it's very difficult. And by the time, it may only be a day or two before they're found out and blocked. But 100,000 emails have gone out. Very, very, very difficult to block. And you need to train that. And your staff has to know that. Everybody's got somebody in the office that'll click on anything, trust me. And you've got to just continue to put that in their minds that be careful. Of course, the policies and procedures can help with that. This PHI scanning is something that I think is crucial. One of the first things that we're basically prescribing is that you do a PHI scan. You go over all your devices, and I promise you that all the people who tell me, well, we don't have any personal information, patient information on any of our devices, when you run that PHI scan, and what it does is it runs a scan across everything and shows you where the information is. Now, of course, it's like anything else. You have to have that stuff in order to do your business right. You've got to have access. Your employees have to have access to the patient record in order to serve them. But you need to know where it is. It's just basic risk assessment. You're just weighing your risk. You want to know where it is. Basically, put it all in one group, and then put ways of protecting it. Well, the first thing you want to do is figure out where it is. Everyone is always surprised as to where it is. They're like, there's no way. And, and there is a way, trust me. It's there. We also offer some things that do the monitoring of networks, to audit the logs. We just got that perfected where we can actually audit logins and logouts on the network. And that's huge because even if what is somebody logging in at 11 p.m. at night for? You need to know that because you always hope that your staff is never going to be one of the people that will be stealing data from you to sell, but you never know. And part of it is training them, having them sign some documentation saying that that's not allowed, and then the other part is at least being able to show if something did happen where you can go back. That's going to keep you in the clear. Also, just started with some cameras. We always say in our industry, you can't manage what you can't see. Put cameras in your office. Watch the critical points within the office of where data can be stolen from. That's another huge thing. You can even set with these cameras where if you set at 8 o'clock at night from 8 a.m. to 5 a.m., that if movement happens by the server room door, where all the patient records are kept, it'll email you, it'll text you, so that you can proactively then roll over on on your phone and look and see who's accessing something in your office, who's in the office. Technology is a great thing, and it's cost effective and it's powerful. Another one is mobile device management. That is something that is very inexpensive, and again, if something does get lost, it's non-reportable. And then the proper type of backup. Y'all familiar with crypto blocker, crypto wall? Anyone familiar with that particular bug? What it does is it encrypts your files, and it's ransomware, and then they send you to a website, and it says basically using bitcoins, which is kind of an internet currency that's non-traceable. You have to give them money. I think it's about $900 now, unless they know they really got you, and they'll re-ransom you. And they'll give them the money, and they'll give you the encryption key to unlock your files. But if you don't have a good backup, it's probably better just hopefully it's about 50% that they're going to give you the files back. You know, that the encryption key will work. But for some, we had a client, I'm like, look, the best thing you can do is give them that $900 and we got the files back. But considering what it cost to recreate those files, it would have been almost impossible. A good backup, you got to weigh that out. You got to think that out, because how many transactions happen during the day? If you're backing up once a day at night, what's that look like? You've got a day's worth of risk if you reproduce that. So those are questions that you really need somebody to hold your hand and kind of go through that with you. We have different levels of backup that I was discussing there. Some's just files and folders, some is the whole server, and it can be snapshotted throughout the day. And also cloud solutions, cloud email with security, where you can send secure email. You need to train your people how to do it, and you need to make it really easy. We can do it where you just put something in the subject line. If you put like secure, mail, then it'll automatically encrypt that file. So that the other person has to go to a web portal and draw that file down, like you've probably seen with your banks. Also another one, this is a replacement for Dropbox. It's a HIPAA compliant, secure way to share files against through mobile devices and even geographic locations where if somebody works from somewhere else, you can have all of your files, and yet they're still encrypted and they're still secure. And then, basically a good cloud platform can oftentimes be a better way, because the cloud servers are in a network operations center, and they're not accessible to people, so they can't put USB drives in. And there's ways that you can mitigate your risk. Tonight, we're going to do something. I'm even going to show you the project. I think you're going to be amazed. This is tonight only. We're not going to do this for Monday or anything else or whatever tomorrow is. But the first 5 companies to sign up, we're going to receive 20% off this risk assessment that Art is going to do in his team. And I'm going to go over that with you. And I'm also going to do a network security audit for you guys so that y'all can kind of see where you stand. And again, that's a no strings attached audit just to show you where exactly you stand. And here's the pricing for the audit. That it's basically 1 to 10 employees, $799, and that would be like a yearly cost. It's billed by the year, and I'll go over that. 11 to 20 is $1,119. 21 to 50 is $1,400, which is an absolute bargain at 3 times the price. And this is what it offers. It's a thorough HIPAA security risk assessment. It's a guided risk assessment where Art and his team takes you through it. They interview you, they answer your questions, as well as after it's all over, you have the review of the session. And we'll let Art speak to that in a second and answer any questions. Also, an employee privacy and security training. Not only a policy, but even a web-based portal where the employees go through and they take the training and then they get a certificate so that you're completely covered. $100,000 of financial protection, customized security policies and procedures, HIPAA business associate incident management tracking so that if something does happen, as well as a place where you can keep all of your business associates agreement. Art. would you want to add to anything there that I've talked about?
No, but the only thing I would say, I think you covered it, is these are the things that if you were to be audited, this is when we go back to Phoenix Cardiac Surgery, they didn't have this, all right? So there could be a breach. You could have a breach. You could accidentally an employee does something wrong. But if you were to be audited, this is what they're going to look for. OCR is going to look for your risk assessment. Going to look to make sure you train your employees and continue to train your employees, that you have policies, that you have business associate agreements. By going through this service, you are really, minimizing the chances of having a very large fine because you are complying with HIPAA regulations. And that's really what OCR has said. If an organization is trying and has made an attempt to comply with HIPAA regulations, they're not looking to find them. But there are so many, go back to that 70% of organizations are not compliant. They find so many organizations that have ignored HIPAA regulations. That's when you see those large fines. By going through this service, which is very streamlined and pretty easy to implement, you are really making a good attempt to be HIPAA compliant, and that will go a long way. And also it'll go a long way to train your employees, make sure they know how to protect information, and also to minimize the chances of data breach.
All right. Any questions that you guys have? Yeah, Art, you really knows a lot about HIPAA. If y'all have any specific questions that y'all want to ask about anything? Tell a funny story. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, our practice opted out of meaningful use simply because there were so many things that we don't make appointments, we don't do recalls, there were too many things that we could not comply with. So does that mean we've opted out of meaningful use audits? Because obviously we're not getting the money.
Art, the question is, and I don't know, did you hear that?
No, I didn't, Philip. You're going to have to relay the question if you don't mind.
The question is, we have a practice administrator, I guess, here, and she is, they opted out of meaningful use because they couldn't basically comply with all the rules. Does that mean that she would not be audited for meaningful use?
Okay, so that's not exactly the case, because if you opted out in stage 1 or 2 and you've already received incentive payments, so say you were in meaningful use in 2012 and 2013, you opted out in 2014 and 2015, you could still get audited. It could go back to 2012 and 2013. So there is a chance that you could still be audited. We're seeing audits going back all the way to 2011. So there really is a chance that you could still be audited for payments that you've already received. And the one thing about that, just let me add one other thing. A lot of organizations are dropping out of meaningful use. It's getting harder and harder to comply with the regulations. But even if you drop out of meaningful use, everyone is required to be HIPAA compliant, all medical organizations. So just because you've dropped out of meaningful use doesn't mean you're dropping out. You don't need to comply with HIPAA and do a risk assessment and training policies. You're still required under HIPAA regulations to be HIPAA compliant, even if you're not going for meaningful use.
Any other questions? I have a funny story, maybe a little risque, but I didn't know what it was, so at least I didn't know. Have y'all ever heard of a website called Ashley Madison? Do what? It's been in the news this week. Been in the news a little bit this week. I wasn't really aware of what they did. It's basically a cheater's website where married people sign up or whatever, and to hook up or whatever. So the funny thing is, my sales guy, we're riding to an appointment, and he says, "Hey, did you hear about Ashley Madison?" I'm like, "No," and I said, "I've heard that name. What is it?" So he tells me they've had a breach, and all of their 37 million records are now out there, and they're basically going to Ashley Madison, the company, and saying, "You give us, I don't even know what the dollar amount is, but you give us money, or we're going to release those records out in the wild." And so I think we underestimate the knowledge is power. Like that that title company who the real estate agent's email was stolen. Now that probably he doesn't know when that happened, but I would not be surprised if they didn't have the guy's email for 6 months. Now, if he would have changed his password, they wouldn't have had it. So that's why just a simple password change goes a long ways. Now, it's not going to help you with the compliance part. You got to do this. I mean, you don't have a choice. That's pretty much, to me, I did this, and again, I'm doing it with the title company right now, who's hired a big firm yet to do it twice as hard. Art, how many documents do you guys provide?
I'm sorry, Phil, did you ask me a question?
I did. How many documents do you provide for that in that assessment?
So the documents from the risk assessment, we provide an executive summary, a detailed report, and a work plan that lists items that need to be implemented. So as part of that risk assessment, we may find some additional security that needs to be implemented. We provide those in the risk assessment. The HIPAA security policies are 18 policies and procedures. There's a HIPAA privacy manual. There's business associate templates. So, from a documentation point of view, we provide all of the documentation that's really required from a HIPAA compliance perspective.
That portion alone, and we're only about halfway through, I know personally, and this is when this company's hired a big firm to do this. I have over 20 hours of billable time helping this company, and they provide it for us. It's just crazy. They signed up and they got this company doing it. So I'm basically the IT guy, so I have to help them. So they're paying me and they're paying this company a ton of money, and it's a struggle to produce those. You sit there, any of you guys have to produce the documentation. You sit there and you work and you don't know if it's really good or not, and they kind of give you some stuff. I tell you, it's just such a bad. That's why I wanted to have Art and I wanted to offer this, because to me, bang for the buck is incredible, and also the training for the staff. And I selfishly want all my clients to train their staff, because it keeps them from tearing up the network. It keeps me from having to work on stuff over these phishing attacks that are absolutely driving us crazy right now. Y'all had an infection from a phishing attack in your office? Nobody?
And just to add, just the training, we've trained over 20,000 employees. We've gotten very good feedback. Normally HIPAA security training, you want to poke your eyeballs out. It's so boring. We've made it interesting. We've made it engaging. There's, quizzes. It's as fun as HIPAA security training could be. But the employees' certificates, practice administrators get a report that shows that all of their employees have been trained and the score that they've gotten on that training. So, from a training module, and it's security training and privacy, and if you get new employees, you can get them trained, so, and then you can retrain your employees. So, from that training requirement, we help the organization, easily implement training, and employees seem to get a lot out of it.
Any other questions?